Everyone, welcome back to the Pain in Your Assets podcast with Stella Bee on air. We are live recording here at the Indiana Black Expo at the Indiana Convention Center in Indianapolis. Currently recording season 2, episode 5, and the topic is it both? My business mentors that I've claimed for myself is Damon Garfield John. When I learned that his middle name, it was hysterical to me. But I call him Shark DJ. He's an American businessman, investor, television personality, author, and motivational speaker. He is best known as the founder and president and Chief Executive Officer of FUBU. And for those who are not familiar with FUBU, it's For Us By Us. And appears as an investor on the ABC reality TV series Shark Tank. He's based in New York and the founder of the Shark Group. And he has several books out on Audible. In the last season 4 of season 2, I spoke on the 7 streams of income, and one of those streams was buying and selling goods and services. And so a person that I would feel would be one aspect of one aspect of buying and selling goods is licensing, and so I included Shark DJ in this particular topic because I feel that him being the founder of FUBU is a great person to research for those who may be interested in starting their own brand. In a variety of ways to expand his brand. An interview that I saw online that he did, a live session, I believe it was, an IG live session with Sylvia Amoruso, and he spoke about how you just do your research. You don't want to go all the little knickknacks and keychains and so forth, unless you're using it just for promotional purposes. But he expanded by going into boots and bags and ladies' fragrances and so forth. But he also expanded by licensing in other countries and territories. Of like with somebody who would have put up a freestanding store, here and there in those locations, but he didn't necessarily have the time or desire to learn all of the various areas, learn all of the people's knowledge to license it that way, or to do it individually. So he tapped into those individuals that were already doing it and licensed it that way. Big under versus business expenses. Again, I am here recording live at the Indiana Black Expo in Indianapolis. So at times individuals stop by my desk or just my table just to speak or ask a question. So if you see me interacting, that's what's happening. And you can hear the music and the noise in the background. That's what's happening. I'm literally here. Yesterday we had the outdoor celebration at the American Legion Mall, and it was a sea of people. The artists were outstanding. They had, I believe, the anchor performers were the Mighty OJs. They also had, I think the opening act was Christian Keys, and they had, the Barge was there. Hi. They also had Howard Hewitt was there, Stephanie Mills was there. Sure, you can feel free to take one. It was outstanding. There's another performance tonight. The one yesterday was free. Tonight there's a ticketed event as well. Getting back to the business of licensing, another person, another success story that comes to mind when I think of licensing is Michael Jordan and Nike. There will never be another MJ, period. I mean, I know that there's others out there. Maybe I'm biased because I wasn't born in Chicago. I was born in Mississippi. However, I basically have been in Chicago since probably about age 3 or 4. So I rock the Chicago teams and brands. And to think that Michael Jordan didn't even make his high school team, and to see where he is now and what he accomplished throughout his career is just simply amazing. There's a new movie that came out. I believe it might have been on Netflix. I'm not sure. Called Air, and it documented his journey and how he and his mom was very instrumental in him obtaining the legendary deal he got with Nike. In that initially they didn't want to give him royalty rights to the brand. They just kind of wanted to pay him out outright. But he and his mom knew that they believed in him so much. They believed in his desire to succeed so much that they knew it would pay off more by him having a stake in the business versus just being paid for the contract outright. And they could not have been more right. In the Paying Your Assets podcast book with Stella Bee on air, of how in comparison to my engagement time span from my first marriage was only 3 months, believe it or not. Because we came from a ministry where we were kind of encouraged to pray and seek God for who your mate would be and believe God. And I mean, we did interact with, the person, so they weren't complete strangers per se, but kind of, because, like I said, my grandma, Medea, used to say, you don't know a book until you live with her. So, of course, we did live with the person. There was no, fornication. If you would have got involved in that, you probably would have been sat down and not really allowed or encouraged to go further from that. So being the restrictive ministry that it was, you were encouraged to pray and seek God, and then we received counsel from the presiding elder, and if you were given the green light from that, and that's, I think that also goes back to the topic that I mentioned in episode 1 with author Ragnar T. Wallace, was for those who have access to sex during this dating stages, you can date and even be engaged for years without actually jumping that broom, because you have access to that. You basically getting everything that you would get in a marriage without having that covenant, without having that commitment, which is the reason why a lot prolong that. But if you're in a situation where you're not having sex because you were encouraged not to, because our ministry was very strict and very adamant about, obeying that particular principle. And so, our engagement period was 3 months. Because if you think about it, right now, for those who are sexually active, can you go 3 months without having sex? Can you go 3 years without having sex? yeah, if you weren't doing it, you probably would have a very short engagement period as well. And so people would say, "Oh my God, y'all got married in 90 days." Well, we didn't know each other just 90 days. I mean, I mentioned in this book right here when I spoke about my why of how I met my former spouse and that how that transitioned. So we knew of each other and we kind of eventually knew somewhat about each other, but yeah, there was no long, extensive dating period. You kind of know, and it's almost like that show, Married at First Sight. So much that because we did know like each other's names and families, and at least the ones that attended the church. So it wasn't that cut and dry. But when you commit to the commitment of marriage, you commit to making it work. And I think that's the reason why you have success stories from that show, Married at First Sight, because you have those individuals who are mentally and spiritually committed to the process. They're committed to the commitment of marriage. And whether you know the person you've been dating and courting in a relationship for 10 years or 10 minutes, if you're committed to that, it'll work. Which is the reason why I mentioned in previous episodes that you have those who were actually dating for 10 years and then got married and divorced in the first year. Because they weren't committed to the commitment. But if you're committed to the commitment, you can know a person for 10 years and be on the show for 10 minutes, and be on the show Married at First Sight and stay married for 10 years. That's the difference. You really can. I believe that's how much I believe. I mean, I'm not a sponsor or a spokesperson for that show, but if they would have let me on there, I would have definitely applied. Because I believe that. I believe for those individuals who really are committed to it. It's like for those who are committed to entrepreneurship. If you're granted, a certain amount of money to start this business and kick it off and make things work, if you're committed to that process, you're going to put in the work, you're going to put in the time to make that business work because somebody gave you an opportunity. They gave you a certain amount of money, you had the resources, you had all the team and everything to do it. You're committed to that. You're going to make it work. If you committed to the commitment of marriage, you would make it work. You would put the time in, you put the work in. And that's really what all it takes is just to have a desire to commit. Hi. Hi. Yeah, that's okay. I can still speak. And our engagement was 3 months. Because after you finally get that green light, you're like, look, I've been abstaining, holding for this amount of time. And it wasn't just about, jumping in the bed, because we knew that it was going to be much more time commitment after that. But I do believe that that's one of the reasons why others stay engaged for so long, because it doesn't take that long to reserve a hall or reserve a church where you're going to have it, to get all of the people your friends that you have. I think we had like 10 bridesmaids, 10 groomsmen. Yeah, we had a large wedding. I had 10 bridesmaids, so we had to have 10 groomsmen for the bridesmaids. Then I had 2 maids of honor, because my best friends at that time weren't married yet. I was the first one in my group. Even though they're like 5 years older than me, I was one of the first ones in my group to get married. So I had 2 maids of honor. I think initially it had like 3 flower girls because of my friends. They had like other sisters who already had kids who were like 3, 4. So I'm like, I want this one, and this one. But my presiding elder stepped in and said, look, you already got 10 bridesmaids. So I reduced the flower girls down to 1. Because one of my best friends at the time, her sister, I chose one of her nieces to be my one flower girl. And we had a ring bearer. And then, there's a host of other hostesses who are assisting. It's a lot of people. And the planning, I would say, my maids of honor, especially my one maid of honor, Ruby, bless her heart, she put a lot of time in. I had her tagging along with me to various bridal expos, and for anyone who's planning to get married, I don't know if they still have bridal expos, especially after the pandemic. They may not. They may have some online where you can go to one that has a variety of vendors that specifically cater to weddings. I strongly and highly recommend that. We went to a couple of bridal wedding expos, and it's kind of like here. Like right now, I'm at the Indiana Black Expo, and there's a variety of tables and vendors for a variety of businesses, nonprofit organizations, and so forth. Same there, where I chose actually a non-traditional spot for my wedding cake at the time. They were like some type of shop that you would not think did wedding cakes. If you were to see the store up on the street and walk in, you would not think that they were a bakery, but they were. And the cake was like one of the best things that I had at my reception. When you walked into it, you could smell the freshness of that cake. It was like awesome. I cannot remember who it was, but I would definitely use them again if I could remember who that person was. And it was like, sometimes it's like that. You're thinking that the big name brands are the ones that are going to provide the best service, and it's not always the case. They were like someone I wouldn't even expect, and the cake was outstanding. Also for my wedding gown, I think back in the day, was it Filene's Basement? They used to have like this annual wedding gown event where once a year they would have like name brand wedding gowns, and they would sell all of them for like $100. Like stuff you would find at like David's Bridal. I mean, they were phenomenal. But you kind of, whatever you found there is what you had to work with. And so I went there with, my faithful maid of honor Ruby, and I checked a few dresses out, and it was one that I saw, and I was like, another person had it on. But I knew she was not going to get it because she was much taller than me, and her arms were sticking out of the sleeve. And I was like, Renee, she's going to put that dress down. She's too tall for it. And I was like, stalk her. I'm going to go over here, look around for some more, but as soon as she take that dress off, pick it up. And I was right, for sure enough, she took it off. That was my dress. The ministry that we were in didn't allow us to have a lot of skin exposure, and the back of my dress, it was kind of out in the back. So we had one of our presiding elders' wives was a great seamstress. In fact, she made all of our bridesmaids' dresses, and so I had her put a piece in the back and she put the same beading that matched the beading that was already on the dress. You couldn't even tell that it was there. It was outstanding, and I was able to lose a little bit of weight before the wedding because it was kind of tight. And somehow I lost some weight, and I think it was like maybe 115 by the time I was up, maybe 120 anyway, but I was like 115 by the time that I actually got married, and it fit perfectly. And so, if you're getting married, I strongly recommend that. It was everything that we needed, from the flowers. We decided on fresh flowers for the men to have in their suits, and for the bouquets for the women, and for the flower girls. So when you came into the church, you can actually smell the fresh flowers versus the imitation ones. So yeah, it was great. I definitely recommend bridal expos for anyone who is getting married. There's a few things that I would do different the second time around, just from the experience of that, but definitely will not have 10 bridesmaids again. And I appreciate all of the sisters that participated in my wedding. They were members of the same church. They tackled along with me throughout my choices. At one point, I had a more expensive dress and shoes, and I'm like, you know what? These are working sisters. Let me change the material. We can have the same the same pattern, but a different material, so it kind of cut the cost in half. So I did that. And then, like the last week before the wedding, we had I had a sleepover at, again, my faithful maid of honor. Her and her roommate hosted us to have the entire female bridal party. We had a sleepover, just to buy some things. We discussed shoes because everyone was not into stilettos. Everyone was not into the red bottoms. So some people, like me, for instance, had flat feet and was not trying to have high heels. So we decided, and I think I had one pair of each. We decided and voted on which shoes they were going to wear. We voted on the hairstyles because I wanted them to be involved. I wanted their input in that. And so we voted on the hairstyles. I think we had like baby's breaths. Back then, it was a style where they would have, it was the French roll that was in the middle, so we had that, and I think some hair down the sides. Please stop by. Yes, and so we voted on the hairstyle back then. The French roll in the middle of the hair was the style back then. So they all had the French roll with the hair on the sides, and with the flower in the women's hair was like we had the fresh flowers of babies, like the little baby's breaths. So that was their flowers for their hair, and it was a very interesting time. Everyone was on one accord. There was no jealousy or anything. I mean, bless his heart, my former spouse was very creative, but yeah, would nobody try to fight me over here? So my mom was the kind of person who she would tell me, get the man that you think was going to be there, because sometimes when you get those men that's super fun and that everybody wants them, you have that challenge. You have that challenge of you got to fight other women to keep him or to get him. And so she was the one that kind of encouraged me. Hey, sometimes the more committed man may not necessarily be the one. Not that saying that they don't have to look like the bottom of your shoe. You don't want somebody you got to put a bag over their head and sleep with. You gonna roll over in the middle of the night and be like, Jesus Christ. Story about that. But yeah, some guys are not. I even had a guy tell me once that you're too beautiful for me to marry because I would have to fight too many guys to have you. Like, truth. I'm not one that dresses extremely provocative in public, but I have seen some women that if she was walking down the street and another guy is hollering at her, he would feel obligated to say something, like if the guy got a little too disrespectful. And so some men don't want to put themselves in that position where they would have to confront the other guy who's getting a little out of pocket just because his woman is refusing to be respectful with her attire. And then you have some women that feel like, well, I should be able to wear whatever I want to wear and not have to worry about a guy in their lip service or even trying to touch me, which is true. But out of respect for your person and not having him to be put in a position or looking like he's weak because he's not trying to defend you. Though is that it's not that people need more time to prepare for a marriage or a business or a sports contract or even a new acting role per se. It's the commitment is what stood and made things happen can make things happen as long as it does. Even without a well thought out vision, there will be periods of learning, transition. Hi, on the job training. Sure, those are for purchase. Feel free to get some candy though. Someone is walking past with one of their wagons. And I guess they're looking for their mom. I'm babysitting today too. There would be periods of learning, transition, on-the-job training, and I think having the basics of what's needed to be a successful teammate is what's really key. And the commitment is the reason why you have the NBA and NFL players who get those contracts based on their ability to be a good fit for the coach and the team. They feel that they're to the process. The topic of another business branding success story I would like to mention would be the founder of TV One and Radio One, Kathy Hughes. Hughes and her husband at the time decided they wanted to buy Hughes and her husband at the time decided they wanted to buy their own radio station in 1979, and after being rejected by 32 banks, they finally found a lender. With that loan, they purchased WOL, a small Washington, D.C. station, and Radio One was born. Great success story with Kathy Hughes. And to kind of close out this, Mr. Desmond, the former Chicago Bears Super Bowl player. Mr. Desmond Clark, the former Chicago Bears Super Bowl player, and he mentioned in life you are either a thermostat or a thermometer. You're either a person who has to check everyone's temperature to determine how to move about, or you're the person who is setting the temperature within the atmosphere you occupy. Quote unquote, leaders are thermostats. Again, thank you for tuning in to the Pain in Your Assets podcast with Stella Bee on air.